Second point under this is percentage of women. This is that it has both women students, right? So students who are women, and also women faculty members and women in senior administrative positions, right?
Let's focus on quality, and by quality I mean all the ranking agencies can easily have some top journals. Okay, that if you publish only in those journals, we will rank you. We'll consider that as a valid publication.
Welcome back to another edition of our
Yes.
uh, podcast with professors, right? So, and as part of our work environment, the latest happening that or the latest release are the NIRF rankings, right? So, there are several controversies which people keep referring to as far as the NIRF is concerned. I think we should also discuss the NIRF rankings. Controversies, as of now, you have people who can find a controversy in anything, right? Milk, which was supposed to be um, one of the basic essential nutrition, people find fault in that also, right? With that perspective, I'd like to say that because there can be a controversy around everything, let's not try to be controversial, but try to examine it on facts the way an academic should, right? And without being partisan about it. So, and at the same time, I always stick to the fact that uh, I can try to be non-partisan, but because of the fact that I am a human, I will always have some bias. I will always carry some bias, and we'll try to lose that bias through the discussion also. Right. So the NIRF rankings, right? We had, uh, I mean, one of the most discussed were the management school rankings. There are the other rankings. It was a fairly comprehensive exercise that was done, and various medical institutions, engineering institutions, universities were also ranked, and the management school rankings were also there. So, undisputedly, I am A and I am Bangalore. I am Ahmedabad and Bangalore. They remain in the top, right? And there's been some reshuffle happening in the others. So to look at that and to discuss that, let's use this forum right now. The first disclaimer that I'd like to put there is that the NIRF is not something that the government forces on everyone. Institutions participate in it, right? So if there is an institution which is not providing information for the NIRF rankings, it might be a top-ranked institution, but it still might not feature in the NIRF rankings because they didn't share that information. And somewhere I think JGU comes in that category where JGU has not participated, the Jindal Global University has not participated in these rankings, and therefore it does not feature there. So therefore you cannot, using this scale, place where JGU would come up in the entire scheme of things, right? So looking at the NIRF rankings, there are I went through the management school rankings, and I went through the components that formed the ranking criteria, and I found those to be comprehensive and at the same time fairly well thought out, right? So I'll go through those rankings next after you give your initial thoughts on what you think about the NIRF rankings, and I mean a general um, thought from your end, and then I'll get into the particulars of what all come under these rankings, what all criteria come under these rankings.
Yeah, sure, George. So, uh, to set the context, what I understand, the rationale behind launching the NIRF ranking from the government's, at least from the government perspective, was that we need to have universities and institutions that feature in the top 100 globally, right? Now, with that intention, we need to increase or enhance the quality of our institutions. So the NIRF ranking are going to give that if you can call that, give that mirror to our institutions, or give a reality check to the institutions as to where they are right now, and what else they need to do to be among the top in the world. Right. So that's what I understand is the basic was the rationale behind launching the NIRF rankings. Now, having said this, the question that I have in my mind is like, if you're talking of global rankings, what are the global ranking that the government is targeting for our institutions? I mean, are we talking, say, if you want to be in the top 100 globally, are we talking about the, say, the QS, the Times Higher Education, or the AWU rankings, right? These are the most renowned rankings there in the world. If those are the rankings that we want to target and we want to feature in the top 100 in those rankings, in that regard, what I think is, see, every ranking has different parameters, right? The QS is different, the Times Higher Education is different, the NIRF is different. And if our eventual target is to use the NIRF as a launch pad, as a sort of reality check to catapult to those rankings, then I think NIRF, the parameters should have been more closer to the global rankings. And I'm not saying exactly mimic, but be more closer to there, if that in eventually is the target, right? Behind the launching of NIRF ranking. If that be not so, in that case, then I find NRF in the Indian context to be fairly okay as of now, right? Yes, I have my own criticisms, and that I'll discuss in the course of this discussion. But given the starting point of these rankings, I find it slightly uh, difficult to comprehend as to why the NIRF ranking parameters are quite different from the global rankings. Right, I think that's my opening remark, and maybe you can throw some light on the parameters of NRF, and then you can take the discussion forward.
Okay, so in the parameters, and I agree with you. Ultimately, the reason for us having these rankings is so that we rank our institutions and therefore set some benchmarks for them, so that they improve on those benchmarks. Right? Only when you have something to compare with, right, can you try to improve on that. You need to have a target that you need to achieve. Right? So, idea behind the NIRF was to set those benchmarks and say that, okay, now you might be, as an institution, you might be performing low on certain parameters. Work on those parameters, your overall level will come up a little, and therefore that will reflect in the global rankings, right? Case in point being the Chinese institutions, right? The Chinese institutions in almost all the global rankings, they have consistently been moving up, right? And the number of Chinese institutions that are there are a huge multiple as compared to the number of Indian institutions that are there. I'm not talking about the American institutions. They have traditionally dominated the American and some of the European institutions also. They've traditionally dominated these rankings, and uh, maybe the rankings are also created based on what were the matrices that they were strong on, right? But leaving that aside, let's look at what are the parameters which the Indian system considers important, and try to examine those, right? So there are five broad heads of the parameters, right? And the first one being teaching, learning, and resources, right? So teaching, learning, and resources. So one of those happens to be financial resources and their utilization among teaching, learning, and resources. Now, compare. There was a recent article about the Harvard corpus, right? The alumni corpus that is there, that being larger than the market cap of LIC of India, right? LIC, biggest life insurance provider, one of the biggest market players in the Indian stock market, and the Harvard, the fund is bigger than even the LIC, right? Now, in that situation, do Indian institutions even have those financial resources? Most of them have started with some sort of government support. Now they are more or less trying to fund themselves through their own sources, which is through fees, etc. But financial resources, are our Indian institutions even close to the international ones, right? So therefore, featuring that as one of the factors is good. at least among the Indian institutions, you start realizing where which institution is placed, and therefore you can try to keep improving on that. There is among the teaching learning, there's another combined metric for faculty with PhD and experience, right? And this is something which sort of matches directly with something that's there on the AICSB. AICSB also has about financial resources. This metric of faculty with PhD, right? That's also another factor. In fact, there was a time when we used to say, um, ask people, why do you want to do a PhD, right? When I had enrolled for my PhD, and people would say that, okay, I want to do a PhD also. I'd ask them, why do you want to do a PhD? Because if you want to get into teaching, right, at that point of time, the thought was, if you want to get into teaching, then you do not need a PhD, because at that point of time, the UGC norms, and I think they still say that for being an assistant professor, you need the net, the UGC net qualification. You do not actually need to have a PhD, right? So spending all that time, if you are a person with industry experience, spending all that time doing a PhD did not make that much sense unless you had a research bent of mind and you wanted to do further research, right? But now, globally also, it is recognized that teachers or academics need to have that PhD degree, because that's the only way that they'll bring the research mindset into teaching, right? So that's another metric. Faculty student ratio with emphasis on permanent faculty, right? That's so there are four metrics under teaching learning resources. So financial resources, metric of faculty with PhD, faculty student ratio, right? Now, faculty student ratio, with the emphasis on permanent faculty, because a lot of institutions could have gamed this by having visiting faculty. And if you have visiting faculty, then I mean, you can have a different visiting faculty for each course and shoot up your metric. But then, do students actually get that value of that education in which the institution stands for with those visiting faculty members? I've also taught as a visiting faculty member. As much as I would want to contribute more to the students, more to the institution that I'm associated with, I cannot as a visiting faculty, because I have other priorities. I would have other priorities also, right? So with having permanent faculty and that being the metric for the faculty student ratio makes total sense. That's how faculty can contribute also to the institution development, to the students' overall development also. And the fourth metric is student strength, including doctoral students, which is about the number of students that an institution has, right? An institution might have just 100 students. They take the best of the best, just have 100 students and achieve everything else. But then, because they have a small pool of students, they're not actually contributing to the nation, contributing to education that much, right? So therefore, that metric also comes in as a factor. And so the student strength also has a direct relationship with the financial resources that the institution has. So somewhere there's a circular calculation going on there. So those were the four metrics which come under the teaching, learning, and resources um, parameter. Right? Any comments on this? I'll go through each of those separately then.
No, I think you go ahead with the these
Okay,
parameters,
all of
and
them.
then I'll come give an overall
Take it, take it,
my
take it.
session on this. Yeah.
Okay. So, and I hope I'm not going too much into detail on this, right?
No, that's fine. Please go ahead.
Okay.
I mean, it's important for all of us to understand the parameters well,
True.
right?
So then there comes the research and professional practice metric, the overall metric being that. And under that, there are four more, which are combined metric for publications, right? So which the next metric under this is combined metric for quality of publications. So both become important, right? As far as publications are concerned, um, getting into a central university itself requires a certain number of publications, right? So as of now, an an academic's life is revolving around publications, and publications are important both for the faculty, for their professional growth at an individual level, and they're important for the institution's contribution also to the academic community. So number of publications and the quality of publications both become important here. At one point of time, it was number of publications, and there were various matrices which were used to look at what would be the quality. Um, with the ASCSB, I'm talking with respect to business schools specifically. So with ASCSB requirements, most institutions are looking at Scopus, while that's a debatable topic whether Scopus publications are enough as a quality metric, but then you need to have some metric, and I am okay with Scopus being considered as a quality metric, that at least it should be a Scopus indexed publication, right? Um, then come IPR and patents, published and granted, right? I think somewhere a lot of our institutions, and especially management institutions, they really score low on IPR and patents, right? Other than maybe the technical institutions, so maybe the DMS at an IIT or at BITS, right? They might have faculty who, or maybe even in NITI, right? They might have faculty who are coming up with a fair number of patents and IPR. But I see I mean, at least off the cuff, I can think of very few institutions which have a high number of IPRs and patents in non-technical fields. So I'm saying non-operations, non-IT sort of fields. In marketing and finance, much fewer patents and IPR which are there. And that is definitely something that we need to work towards. Just the Chinese institutions are doing very well on this parameter. And internationally also, this finds good weightage. And then there is the fourth metric under research and professional practice, which is footprint of projects and professional practice. Right. So that is about what sort of industry interface you have, what sort of projects you're doing with the industry, for the industry, what sort of professional practice do you have? Are you in touch with the industry? Okay,
Okay,
so
okay.
those were the four points under research and professional practice, which was combined metric for publications, combined metric for quality of publications, IPR and patents, and the fourth one being footprint of projects and professional practice. Okay. Now the third major topic under major parameter under these were graduation outcomes, which is metric for university examinations, which is detailed out as the number of students um, passing the respective university examinations in stipulated time for the program in which they're enrolled, right? So there's a calculation that goes into it, but of all the students who are enrolling, how many are actually graduating out, right? And I think that's also a decent metric, though I feel that this is something which can be open to gaming, because an institution might lower its standards and graduate a higher percentage of students out, and just to get a good score on this. But then that reduces the number of the quality of this metric, right? And the second under graduation outcomes is metric for number of PhD students graduated. So how is the institution contributing to the academic community in terms of researchers that it is putting out in the form of PhD students, right? So PhD students are both a contribution to academia because they are future academics, and they're also a contribution to industry because they go in, PhD students go into industry also as experts in their own field, right? So that's another factor. So we've looked at three major parameters: teaching, learning, and resources, research and professional practice, and graduation outcomes. The fourth major parameter is outreach and inclusivity. So this is a very interesting parameter, and it has five subpoints under it. And somewhere the socialist idea of India comes through in this. Percentage of students from other states or countries, which is regional diversity. First point under that. So how many foreign students do you have? How many students from the rest of India, right? So you might be a you might be an institution based, let's say, in Delhi or Bangalore, right? But are you attracting people from other parts of the country? And I think Delhi University, for one, scores well in this because people do come from far-flung areas, from extreme ends of the northeast, from all the way down south, from the west. Everywhere there are people coming to places like Delhi University, JNU, etc., to study at these institutions, right? And some way they are bringing, and I know for me, it is a very nationalistic ideal also, that people, these institutions act as centers of national integration, and therefore they contribute to that ethos of Indianness. Um, I don't think that was so much of a criteria for them, but for me personally, I appreciate this factor. The more you live and study with people from other parts of India, the more you integrate them with your culture and your culture with theirs, right? Second point under this is percentage of women, right? Like women diversity. How many women do you have? So does it, let me just quickly take a look at, so it has, the sweet thing about this is that it has both women students, right? So students who are women, and also women faculty members, and women in senior administrative positions, right? So the expectation is there should be approximately 50% women students and at least 20% women faculty. And I think this is a fairly positive metric. Um, बेटी बचाओ बेटी पढ़ाओ, right? बेटी को पढ़ाने के लिए you need you need to get them admissions also, right? And somewhere I think this was a sensible metric. Internationally, I don't know if there is a women-centric parameter coming in any of the international rankings. Maybe they did not need it. Maybe we needed it. And the more we do that, the more inclusive the classroom atmosphere is going to be, the more inclusive the institution is going to be. And therefore, overall quality of the institution is going to increase. The third point under outreach and inclusivity is economically and socially challenged students, right? So, in a country like India, where we know about the fact that social challenges have existed, a lot of us staying in urban areas, coming from a background of privilege, right, do not understand this economic and social challenge that a big part of of our population faces. The fact that the government has put this here, I know there are lots of protests and controversies around reservation, but then somewhere this also forming a metric is looking at bringing up the overall standard of the nation. It is not looking at just aiming at being the best, right? It's not um, uh, a one track effort at being the best, but making the country the best, right? So I I'm also in favor of something like this. Uh, Facilities for physically challenged students, right? Um, so how accessible is your institution? Is there support for disabled students, right? Disabled students, disabled faculty, all those factors would come in this also. Um, Okay. If the institution provides full facilities for physically challenged students, right, and yeah, in proportion to other facilities which are there, are the facilities there for physically challenged students? So it could be in terms of things like, so there's a questionnaire that they have for it. It could be in terms of access, right? So ramps, wherever there are stairs, are there ramps also? Um, it could be access to maybe um, a, a what do you call it? I don't know what's the technical term for it, but then when you have a blind student, is there someone to help them read the question paper or write? There's a technical word for it, but then whatever it is, that factor also would come in. And then there is, under outreach and inclusivity, there is a PR which is called perception ranking, which is okay. Perception ranking, I don't know why it comes here because it comes back to the main screen. But the fifth now, the main or the big parameter, which has only one subpoint under it, is peer perception, right? Peer perception is among academic peers and employers, right? So this is done through a survey conducted over a large number of employers, professionals from reputed institutions, etc., where they are quizzed about the institution and whether they're aware of it, what they know about that institution, etc. And therefore, it if you are creating graduates, is the industry recognizing your graduates? Are they, I mean, it should not be that you mention your university or your college and then people are like, okay, I didn't know there was a institution named that way, right? So somewhere it's about in the industry's acceptance of your institution, of the products of your institution, right? So those are the five. Let me just give a list once again. Teaching, learning, and resources was the first. Research and professional practice being the second. Graduation outcomes being the third. Uh, Outreach and inclusivity being the fourth, and peer perception being the fifth. So five major heads that they look at. Okay. So now over to you.
So, very well explained, George. So, thank you for putting the context right. We understand what are the parameters based on which NIRF rankings are done. Now, the way I look at it is, and this is not just for NIRF, it's true for all rankings that I look at is, who are these rankings done for? I mean, who is it that is intended to get the benefits from, right? There's the first question. Now, the obvious answer to this is the other stakeholders, right? Then the question is, who are the stakeholders here, the primary stakeholders? First, the students, obviously, the student, the parents, right, their guardians. So that's the first one. And then you have the teaching staff, the faculty, the staff who are going to work in those institutions, right? So these are the two direct parameters. And then obviously you have other stakeholders who fund the institutions, the alumni, and the society overall, right? You have all those things. Now, when you talk of rankings, who do they help? Ultimately, an institution is run by the primary stakeholder, the students and the staff, right? But these are the two who, on a daily basis, interact, and they are the ones who take it forward, right? The other stakeholders are also a very important role, but then they are not the direct beneficiaries as such, right? An alumni obviously would be affected by how his or her institution is doing, but then that alumni might also do a lot of other things, and his or her success might be very independent from the reputation of the institution that he or she has passed out from, right? So obviously, institution has a bearing on an alumni success, but not as much as a current student would have, right? So for me, the question is, who are these rankings intended to help? Okay, so I would assume that given these rankings, the way these are put, the primary beneficiary or the intended primary beneficiary are the students. Okay, and then obviously the teaching staff, the non-teaching staff, the people who work in there. Let's talk of the primary beneficiary here, who are the students. Okay, now for a student, like say if I am a student or I am, say in your case, say you are trying to choose a good institution for your daughters, right? What would you look into? Right? Would you look into how many PhD students are there? How many faculty with PhDs are there? Would you look into, I mean, there are a lot of things. Perhaps those will be some of the criteria. I'm not saying that they will not be, but I guess the biggest criteria, if I can just list out two or three, one would be the job outcome or student outcomes, right? In terms of job opportunities that the university provides, right? Maybe in the campus or outside, but even if it's outside, the reputation of the university, right? I mean, if my daughter is moving, applying a job outside, and she has the name of, say, St. Stephen's or an IMK or an IM Ahmedabad, the kind of acceptability that she would get is very different from any other institution, right? So that thing is very, very important. So so basically placements I'm talking about. Second are the fees, right? Will I be able to afford that? Even if I'm able, if suppose I'm not able to afford that, what kind of loan will I have to take, right? That's the second thing. So, and obviously tied to that is that how much time will it take for me to repay that loan? That is the ROI part of it also coming. Right. So broadly speaking, as a student or the guardian of a student, parent of a student, I would look into the placements, I would look into the fees, I would look into the ROI. Right, that's the primary three concerns. And for many of them it might be location, it might be a lot of other things as well, there'll be a lot of other things as well, but primarily these are three things. If these three things do not fall in place, you would not essentially think of a given university, right? That's one of the reasons why you see some of the new age business schools doing really well, because they have focused on this, right? On the placement, I can name some Masters Union, you can talk Bitsom, you have XLRI, the new campus in Delhi and NCR that has come out. They are focusing on those three things: the placement, the job opportunities, the fees, and the ROI. Right? Yes, they have higher fees, but they're also giving substantial job opportunities, which in a way gives a better ROI. Right? Now, if you look at these rankings, how much emphasis is given on these three parameters? If these rankings are intended to help me as a student or the guardian of a student, how much is it helping? Right? I do not see much of it there. Correct? Just because a given university is in say top 10 or top 15, it has no guarantee that it's going to give me great opportunities. Because if you look at these parameters, okay, and I'll just quickly just highlight some of this. For example, one of the things that people talk about is faculty student ratio. One thing that I do not understand is how does it help a student as such? Like you can have a faculty student ratio of 1:5. Okay, so for every 5 students, there is one faculty. But in a class, you will have, say, in an Indian context, you will have 60 students at least, right? In an Indian context. Correct. So you can have a 1:5 overall in the university, but it's not that every 5 students is getting the attention of, I mean, every 5 students is getting attention from one individual faculty. It's not happening. It doesn't happen on the ground. Right. So that very parameter of faculty student ratio, I'm not sure how it helps any student or how it helps the teaching staff or the university to create value for the students.
Okay.
You talk of so, yeah,
I'll come to
yeah,
that. I'll come to that at the end.
okay,
This one I have some sort of a solution to, but I'll come to it at the end.
okay,
Finish yours.
sure, absolutely. Yeah. So the next one that and I'm just randomly choosing and taking, if I can get, we can go to each of these parameters, the merits and demerits, but I'm randomly thinking from a student perspective. My thesis is that who are these rankings going to help? If it is students, then how are these parameters going to help the students? So for example, you talk of, okay, publications. Research publications are one of the very important parameters. A lot of weightage is given, and I think 30% weightage is given to research, right? Now, okay, for undergrad and a postgrad level, at least for an undergrad level, I understand this publication will not help, but for doctoral studies and say post graduation, research publications would help. I mean, research is an important parameter, so that makes sense. But my question again here is that right now the focus is more on quantity. How many students are coming up with how many publications are there as a university coming up? As a result of this, to game the system, many universities are coming up with publications. They give us targets to every undergrad has to publish one Scopus index before they graduate. A lot of universities are doing. As a result, they're pumping those numbers and they're self-citing. We know a lot of reports that are there, and I can name a few. There was a recent report that came up, but there are a lot of other institutions who do that. The point is that kind of research helping anyone except for the institution to gain some brownie points in the ranking? Right? And if that is helping their ranking, in a way, that's a fudge. I mean, in a way, that's really not helping the stakeholders in any way. It's just helping the institution to gain up the ranks. Okay, and but then that's based on vanity matrices, not helping the stakeholders at any point, at least the students at any point, not even to the doctor students. Right. So what I think as a solution to this is that let's focus on quality, and by quality I mean all the ranking agencies can easily have some top journals. Okay, that if you publish only in those journals, we will rank you. We'll consider that as a valid publication. In management, we have something called FT rankings. We have something called the UT Dallas. For engineering, also it can be nature, it can be science, it can be a lot of things. But let those be the quality parameters. Only then we'll understand that yes, quality publications are happening, and that will be the right metric for any doctor student to choose a given university. That's one. Second, patents. Now we talk of a lot of about patents, but the question is how many of these patents have actually been commercialized? Till a patent has been commercialized, right? I mean, many people might differ from this, but I would really doubt the value addition that a patent does to the society. Okay, so I have limited knowledge in this, but I think rather than talking of patents, let's talk of the patent that have been commercialized. Give more points to that. Okay, and there can be some others as well. Those who are so from the engineering or the science field, they can give better ideas. But I don't think all patents deserve to get equal weightage. Right now, that's what is happening. Right, we just look at the number of patents. Right? It's better to look at some quality. Okay, and one of them is the commercialization aspect of. Okay, there can be some others as well, right? But at least from a journal perspective, I think it's easily done. It can be done. Then let's have a list that if you publish only in those journals, you will be given points and you'll be ranked in those, right? That will be really helpful for those doctoral students and the master students. Graduate outcomes, I think that's an important parameter and that is pretty much well taken, but I'm not very sure whether that metric, the number of PhD students graduated, right? How is this going to help anyone? Right? I mean, look at an institution like an IISc Bangalore. The average time for a student to do a PhD in IISc Bangalore is 6 to 7 years, at least 7 years actually. Right? You'll find very few students graduating less than 6 years at IISc. Okay. Now, if an IISc institution like IISc has to follow this metric or change this metric saying number of students that graduates, right? Look at the time that they'll think, okay, now we have to lessen the time. Their focus is on quality. They're focusing, you know what, you have come because you have devoted your life to to research. So it doesn't matter 5 years, 6 years, or 7 years. They have other funding ways also, right? Because a lot of projects come and they help the PhD students also to gain some funding in those post 5 years. But their focus is on quality. Okay, so I really don't understand how this metric is going to help anyone. Okay, even metric for university examinations, like really, I mean, I don't know how this helps. I understand placements is okay, median salary matters, like those points, these are valuable. In terms of outreach and inclusivity, I think those metric, I think it's fairly okay. About percentage of women, percentage of socially and economically challenged students. I think all those are pretty okay. I do not have much comment. I think that is okay. But again, this metric also. It all, I mean, yes, the question can come that how does it help a student in that case? But then the question is like, at least you'd know that, okay, this university does value diversity. Okay, because when an institution values diversity, it means it is tolerant to diverse opinions as well. So that means it gives that space. So in a way that indirectly it helps us. Okay, about perception, again, that's a parameter that can be really, really gamed. Okay, and many institutions do that. It's based on surveys, based on something, and I mean, you can game that. So again, I don't know how I mean, yes, perception helps, but I don't think this can be a parameter in the rankings. It does not matter how many you send a questionnaire to 5,000 people and what those 5,000 people say, and I am Ahmedabad is going to stay I am Ahmedabad. Doesn't matter who says what. Okay, and there will be people who will decide I am Ahmedabad for what it is, but it is I am Ahmedabad. It is the Bangalore, the Calcutta, the ISBs, the IIT, the IIT Bombay, the Kharagpur, the Kanpur. They'll stay as they are. Right? It doesn't matter. I don't need to see a questionnaire or ranking to tell me what the perception is. So I don't think this as a, it's an important thing. Perception is important, but I don't think given the methodology to gauge the perception in these rankings uh, is helpful. So that's why, because many of the institutions actually game this to gain higher points on the perception thing, because it's based on questionnaire and they can do a lot of things to influence those respondents. So overall, the point I'm trying to say is that NRF, the purpose or the not just NRF, in fact, for that matter, any ranking, if you see, the intention is good, but I'm not very sure whether the methodology is true also for QS or times higher education. If you look at the parameters, I don't see much for the students. I mean, they are the students. You are saying that this rankings will help you to choose a better institution. There are a lot of, I'm not going to name them, but there are a lot of like private and also some government institutions which are ranked above an IIT, some of the good IITs, right? Some of the good IIMs. Does not matter what the rankings are. If I get a chance in an IIT, I'll go for an IIT. Does not matter. It does not matter. You tell me which private university located in Chennai or Noida is better than IIT Indore, right? If I get an IIT Indore, I'll go to IIT Indore, right? It's as simple as that. You don't think much about it. So I think this sentiment should be reflected as well in the ranking, but that's what you are trying to help the student to make a good decision, an informed decision. These rankings are confusing. I see this, what they're doing is then confusing. Okay, these are just because these are becoming a tool for marketing for many of these universities, right? So, and good institutions which are established, they don't even need to do that kind of marketing. So that's my perspective. I mean, we need to be very clear who we are making these rankings for, and if we have thought through this, we need to be honest to that task. Okay, so that's my take.
Okay. So I have some points of clarification for two of the matrices that you criticized, and then about who the rankings are meant for. A little perspective on that also, which is stemming from your introduction into to this discussion. But let me first talk about the faculty-student ratio, right? Now, while that seems like a very gameable metric, right, that you can have five faculty members per student, how does that help a student? Ultimately, in the classroom, you'll have 60 students, 50 or 60 students, right? So it's not actually one student, five students having access to one faculty member. But somewhere, I think it is maybe the weightage can be lesser, but it is still a relevant metric because it then shows that how much or what sort of diverse opinions, and one aspect is what sort of diverse opinions is the student being uh, s- exposed to, right? So if an institution has a very high faculty to student ratio, right, so maybe 20 is to 1, what that ultimately would mean is that the same faculty member might be teaching the students multiple courses. So I might be teaching introduction to marketing in the first year, and then I might be teaching what services marketing in the third semester, and then B2B marketing in the fourth semester, right? But then the students are suffering because they are not getting multiple perspectives. Ultimately, they'll get the perspective and experience and examples which Sunil George Matthew can provide, right? So that variety would come only if you have a higher faculty, right? So you have more people available to give out more courses, and therefore different perspectives, different aspects that might come in. Also, other than just the classroom, the beyond the classroom experience that the student is supposed to get, which is where the permanent faculty factor comes in, is that do the students have access to faculty in general, right? So things like mentorship programs. So if you have 20 is to 1 sort of a ratio, then you'd have one faculty member mentoring 20 students on an average, right? But if you have 9 is to 1, that means there are only 9 students that you would mentor. And these are all ideal case scenario. They don't happen exactly like that. But then it is aiming for that sort of a situation. Ideal, yes, but we can, I mean, we keep walking towards that ideal, right? So somewhere some progress towards that ideal. The second thing about publications, now my perspective is that yes, the let's say the FT50 and the UT Dallas rankings, those journals are very important, and therefore publication in them should have a much higher weightage. But considering the past, right, where publication was not such a big deal, where there was hardly any emphasis in the university systems, even in the B schools earlier, there was when there was not much emphasis on publication, you would have a faculty member who maybe did their PhD 30 years ago, continuing to teach. You do not know whether they're actually interacting much with the industry also. It's still their perspectives, what they learned 20, 30 years ago, um, that they still might be teaching. If you write a research paper, the literature review section itself ensures that you go through current literature. You are at least uh, aware of what are the developments. If there is service quality which was created 20 years ago, then is are there developments, or are there additions, or um, reduced emphasis on some aspects of the serve call framework which a student needs to be aware of. If I'm publishing research in that area, at least I'll be still tuned into, okay, so right now the emphasis is has been decreased on this aspect of circ wall. Maybe there are other additional aspects which have come in. Things like that would happen. So at least somewhere it is setting a base, even with publications. But then, yes, quality of publication should have a much higher weightage than the number of publications. I totally agree on that. Peer perception, even though it can be gamed, and this has 100 marks attached to it, right? Most of the others that I've seen are 20, 30 marks, etc. This one thing has 100 marks attached to it. Very important. Ultimately, for the student, that degree is also playing towards where I end up getting a job, etc. Right. So that peer perception definitely matters, but I think it needs to be worked out in such a way that it does not get gamed. Graduation outcomes, I seriously have a big issue with the way the two matrices, metrics under graduation outcomes are mentioned. I think this really needs to be worked out, because metric for university exams, it is a direct incentive to me as an institution to reduce my quality and pass as many people as possible. Right. So I totally agree on that. Now, as far as who are these matrices mentioned applicable to, definitely the students. That's the most important constituency and the most relevant constituency, and those are the people who are going to be using these the most. Employers would never consider these rankings, right? Because your degree is just your first step. How you perform and the quality of the student from an institution, right? That is not determined by any of these rankings. But one stakeholder which you had mentioned in the beginning itself, and I had also supported that, are the institutions themselves, right? By these rankings, I think the institutions should be able to set benchmarks to themselves that, okay, we are performing very low on this parameter. We need to work on this parameter. And therefore, it can be a learning process for the institutions. That's my perspective. Students, yes, students and parents, while deciding where to take an admission, yes, this does matter. But then for the institutions themselves, it acts as that, okay, what is our goal? Where do we need to put our efforts? This, I think, would help a lot in that. Sorry, that's my perspective. Maybe you can have some
No,
concluding views.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, I guess yeah, we pretty much agree on most of the points that you said, but I'll just put out few more problems that I have with this, right? For example, one of the big things is the data verification part of it. Like the universities, they have to self-declare their numbers, okay? And we can be very certain that there are many universities which are not completely ethical in their numbers, or there's some fudging that goes on. It goes on. We all know it's just an open secret, right? So I think the verification part of it also becomes important. You talk to the peer perception thing, which is important, but as I also say that, see, ultimately what is happening is that these rankings are in a way try making peer perception. I mean, these rankings, once they come out, is aiding to the perception in the market among the students, among the stakeholders, right? So let's not have a peer perception metric in the ranking itself, because you are doing the job of making a perception here. Okay, how do you make that perception? I mean, the methodology to get those perceptions, what do you call those questionnaires and all, which can be in a way gamed, right? So my thing is that peer perception is important, but rankings are not rankings cannot have that as a metric to make the overall list. The list that comes out will make the perception, right? So it should not be an input out thing. It should be rather an output of the ranking. So that what I say. Uh, okay. Another thing that I have is that if you look, the NIRF ranks institutions of different parameters. There is one for engineering, one for management, one for universities, one for overall. I don't know what overall means, but you have something called overall. You have something for law. You have got pharmacy, and for all the ranking, the parameters remain the same. That's something again, it's a bit puzzling to me. I mean, every discipline is different. How can you have same kind of parameters for all the disciplines. There should be some discipline-centric changes that should be there. Okay, I think right now that thing is missing. Okay, that would mean more work for them, obviously, but I think that should also come in if you really want to help the students. Um, so overall, these are the my problem with the NIRF and also for all the other rankings as well, because even those rankings are not really focusing on the student. Those rankings are also not really helping the students in making a more conscious decision. Rather, right now it's confusing because you have all the universities, the marketing teams, the counselors saying, you know what, in the NIRF we are at this rank, in the QS we are here, in the Times Education here, but their seniors are talking of different things, right? Their perceptions, their neighbors who have passed out or know someone in those universities, they say a very different thing. It's confusing, right? Let's try to really help the students. And if you really try to help the students, I think a lot of these parameters will be changed. I would still maintain placements. Placement also is very narrow term. I think even placement we need to define, okay, in terms of job outcome or student outcome. There we need to put some work. But one of the things is placement. Obviously, that has to be there, which is factored. But I would want more weightage there. Fees, very important. If you really want inclusivity, you need fees. I mean, even if the fees are higher, okay, let's not just say, okay, fees should be lower. I'm not saying fees should be lower. The question is, even if fees are higher, do you have enough scholarships so that the meritorious students are not laid back, right? So some of the private universities, I understand the fees need to be higher, okay, but if you put a focus on fees and you really define it well in terms of scholarships and everything, many of the private universities and also the government ones will now also focus on generating different sources of funding. You talked of Harvard, the endowment and everything that they get. Indian institutions are now trying to do, but the focus will be more there the moment there is a parameter on fees, okay, or fees and scholarships, something like that, right? Or sources of funding. So that's important thing. And third is ROI. And again, ROI most often in India we tend to define, okay, if I'm paying a fees of 20 lakhs in 4 years, I'm getting I should not get anything less than 20 lakhs. If I get anything less than 20 lakhs, it's not a good ROI. It should not be that. Like, it should not be just about 1 year, the first job that you get. Right? By ROI, it means in the next 3 years and in the next 5 years. Where do students reach? Something like that. Maybe it can be 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year. ROI also has to be in different phases, right? I mean, but for me, for a student, these are three broad parameters where most weightage should be given, and I think almost 70 to 80% weightage should be given there. Next 20% can be a lot of all of this. You can call for, say, inclusion, diversity, and all of this. I also think, and that might be slightly radical, for graduate students, there should be one sort of ranking. For masters and PhD students, there should be different ranking, where for the doctoral students and the masters, rather than placements, research outcomes should be given more weightage. Okay, because we are trying to help the students. Okay, let's help them. Saying these are the rankings if you are considering for your undergrad education. These are the rankings if you are considering a postgrad and a doctoral study. Okay, that means that there most universities, I mean, for an IIC sort of institution, they may not score much uh, big on the undergrad education. Absolutely okay. IIC is a research institution, right? So why do you need to club there? If your focus is to graduate and get a job, you're not thinking of research or masters. Why do you even think of an IIC? There are other institutions. But if you really want to build a career in research, if you really are passionate about it, an institution like IIC is the place, and let them get that, right? So based on the level of the education, also, I mean, we are talking of NAP, multiple exit, entry point, 4 years, and all of those things. I think the rankings also should tie up to that thing, right? Today, one of the bigger, anomalies that rankings follow one process, the accreditations follow another process. No, I don't understand why. How the accreditation is helping, how the ranking is helping. Everything, if it is about students, then everything should be tied up together, right? And really, really help the students. I mean, they're talking a different language, confusing people, and students are seeing different parameters too. That's the reason why I told, like, Masters Union or Bitsum or XLRI, Delhi NCR, Jhajjar are getting great placement because great students are going in. So they just don't care about which rankings these institutions are. They look at what these institutions are there to offer, right? So, and that is what will remain. And let's empower the students in doing that. And that will also help the faculty and non-teaching staff as well. So that's my concluding thoughts on it.
Great, great. I agree with all of them. And variety of opinions remain. We have not commented on any of the rankings, right? We have uh, our own perspectives of where our institutions should be placed in these rankings, and we've not gone into any of those, um, just to keep the controversy at bay, right? But
No, no,
yes,
absolutely. I mean, our intention is to really think of the overall higher education system or
true,
the
true,
education system. I mean, the moment you see one unexpected institution topping up over an IIT, NIT, triple IT, automatically the rankings becomes questionable and people start
true,
questioning and laughing over that, right?
true,
So, I mean, those things really does not help anyone, right? It rather questions the credibility of these rankings. Right? And
true,
the ranking agencies cannot say, okay, see, these are parameters, we are transparent, and based on this, we did that, so they're good. But then the question, who are you helping? I think that
true,
question has not yet been answered by the agencies. And some have been many years with all the criticism. I think there should be some serious thought going into this. See, we come from business background, right? I mean, we are marketing faculty. So we put the customer at the center. Right? For us, it's very important who the customer is before we think of any product, any service, any offering, right? Somehow,
true,
this product is not thinking of the customer, it's just thinking about itself. There's a sense of like I am what I am just because I mean just because I belong to the government, so there's a credibility that you should trust me and all of that. Doesn't happen, right? Is in a market economy you have to put the customer at the center, and here we are trying to
true.
help the students. Anyway, so I think George, thank you
Great.
for this discussion. I think it was
Yes,
hopefully the listeners will have some insights on this. So we'll
true.
be back again with
And
another exciting discussion.
yes, and while we expected it to be a short one, it ended up being a long one still. I guess the matter
Yeah,
needed
done.
a little bit of insight. So great. Anyway,
Yeah.
we'll be back soon.